cafeteria situation that happened in 2005 was really brought to our city by Charles Fisher, the pastor at New Life.
And he just said, why don't we just take off? I got some friends down there. There's some churches that work with our organization, our denomination, that are ready to be able to handle us, and they're accustomed to this kind of work. And so he said, let's just go. I can make all the arrangements. And within a week, he had already talked to the people.
And within, I think it was like 7 days, we had 103 people who all went to Mississippi. The place where we had to stay was in Alabama in a big gymnasium. It was divided into one side for women, one side for men. And all 100 and some of us were in that gymnasium.
They had food for us, so really all we had to do was concentrate on being with each other and doing the jobs that were assigned to us.
The trip was really exhausting, but one of the most amazing things happened on the plane ride home when we kind of congregated in the aisle and started talking about what had happened and how important it was and how we didn't want to stop.
We were all excited and thought, we got to keep doing this. We have to somehow work together again, because we worked so well together, and it was so good having that dynamic where it wasn't just one church or one congregation that was working together. It was a city of believers working together.
There were conversations that started spontaneously, and it was the idea of, are we going to wait for a disaster to hit Longview Kelso before we do something for our own town? So the idea for Servant Week was born during that time. The first year it was called Deke Week.
In our time since then, what grew out of that Katrina relief was, I think it was originally called Deke Week, but every year we'd take a week where the local churches would get together and do as much service as we could for the community.
The first year of Deke Week went so well that we decided to do it in the year 2007 for the second week. The first year we did about 32 projects, and then in the second year we did 42 projects that were completed.
Here specifically at LPD, we've had groups of people come out. They've power washed the building, they've cleaned up our parking area. These are things that we were not able to afford to do on our own.
Year 2 was such a success that we decided to do it again in 2008. That year we did about 40 projects, but the projects became bigger and more ambitious.
Or one year we focused part of Servant Week on taking a block in the Highlands and adopting that block. And I forget how many roofs we put on and how many houses we painted and cleaned the streets, cleaned the yards, did all kinds of different things, all on just this one block in the Highlands.
In 2008, as a part of Servant Week, we took on an Adopt the Block in Highlands. It was one of our largest projects ever. The highlight for me was that on a Wednesday evening, we had well over 150 youth and young adults serving whatever the people of this block needed. Tons of yard maintenance, mowing, edging. It was just a blessing to come together and be a part of helping them make their block a better place.
One of the more ambitious projects that we took on was 2008 when we agreed to refurbish the Longview Memorial Stadium, and the school superintendent was pretty worried that we wouldn't be able to get it done in time. Graduation was a couple weeks away, but you know, with 150 volunteers, a little over a week, we had the thing painted, all the bleachers repaired, restained. It was beautiful, and it just really showed us what we could do and the size of project we could take on if we really got a lot of volunteers together and the church came together, and it's pretty exciting.
I am one of the coordinators for the Loving Teachers Project that we began in 2009. It was a wonderful experience of helping 2 elementary schools. We brought supplies in and helped with teachers that have to pay out of pocket so many of their different needs that they have. In 2010, we had hoped to double that to 4, but instead, due to the generosity of the citywide churches, we were able to do 7 schools. That meant that over 80 teachers received supplies or gift cards to begin their school year. That meant that over 1,600 children were affected with all of the supplies that were given.
Between Servant Week 3 and 4, a transition started to take place. Calls for help came in way beyond the week of service that we had set apart, And so Servant Week was turning into Servant Summer, Servant Fall, Servant Winter. Fortunately, we had plenty of Servant Week volunteers who were willing to step up to the plate and meet those needs. But it began to create in us a question, is God leading us into something full-time? So we began to pray about that. And as we prayed about that, we also began to look around the country to see if this phenomena was taking place in other communities as well. And that's when we discovered Love Inc. So after a lot of prayer and after looking at Love Inc., we decided in 2009 that we were going to form a Love Inc. affiliate here for year-round service in our own community. One of the exciting things that happened during this transition was that more and more agencies in the community started calling Love Inc. with requests for help, whether it be for an elderly person or disabled or single mom. If there was a need that came up, more and more they started calling Love Inc. Well, they weren't calling Love Inc., they were calling the church. And I got excited about that because I realized that when they started thinking about who can meet these needs, they started calling the church. And it reminded me of Jesus' words, if you want to be great in the kingdom of God, you must be the servant of all. And that was what was happening in this transition from Servant Week to Love Inc. In the fall of 2010, Servant Week officially transitioned to Love Inc., full-time service in the community. A little bit later that year, our governor in the state of a state address painted a rather bleak future for the state of Washington when it came to monies available for aid. She said this: the safety net is going to be stretched thin in some places and eliminated entirely in other places for the functions that government will no longer be able to provide. We must turn to our neighbors, private charities, faith-based organizations, and other local programs for assistance. Our communities more than ever will be asked to step up. Well, it seems like Love Inc. was born for such a time as this. I believe that we have an incredible destiny in this community from those who have gone before us. I want to read to you some words Barry Long in 1925 that I think summarizes part of that destiny in which we have been so blessed to inherit. This is what he said. He said, until Longview gives every man, woman, and child within its borders an opportunity to live happily and to improve mind, soul, and body, to have healthful surroundings, honest work to do, and a home in which to live, Longview has an unfinished task. I believe that Love Inc. flows in the vein of these words, and that's our commitment to this community.
Show you are the Lamb of God.